So this video is probably not going to be super organized because I have two things I want to talk about. And the first is kind of hand construction. So the hand we can see on the right is a hand Homer had in an Occult Fan article. And it's one that really stuck with me. And the idea is, and I've brought up this hand before, but I want to go a little more in depth, is it has this corner starter. It is ready to be recaptured and locked in if it is captured either way. And the recaptures are set to be very easily recaptured and locked in as well, right? Nothing ever takes by overpowering, it all takes by using plus wall, so that if something should be comboed back, then the hand will, nothing can ever have a lengthy combo made by the opponent because we're capturing with our sixes, taking sixes, right? So even if they plus wall us here, it only flips the one card. And so this is the core idea of the hand, is it sets up this corner that we are ready to retake, and we are ready to retake the recapturing cards. But I think it does a few other things that are neat as well. One is, after the first move, the hand is pretty close to perfectly balanced, right? It has these two corners. It has, I'm just moving the card for the opponent so that I can move these cards. It has a corner for 7 and a corner for 3 that are basically balanced, are fully balanced directionally. It's 9 power in each direction. And then we have one card that's good side to side and one card that's good up and down. So a lot of times you'll see a hand that is balanced directionally for the 5 cards, but once the first card is played, it suddenly becomes unbalanced, right? And this is a hand that one of the neat things I think it does is after the starter is played, now the hand is balanced. Now, you could argue that's not quite optimal, that maybe you want the hand to be slightly directed up left after starting in the top left. But I think it's a neat feature of the hand that it remains balanced after its starter. And specifically after a corner starter, when that tends to be less common. Often the hands that remain balanced after their starter are center starters. Another thing it does that I really like is it sets up a potential second turn play. So if they go somewhere on the right side of the board, again, random move, one potential option we have, assuming they still have captures on our starter, if they don't, we might want to start locking it in, is to play 6, 7, 2, 3, and 7. Because after this move, again, making a random move for the opponent, 2, 6, 3, 6 has a plus wall in 2, a plus wall in 8, and a plus in 4. And so one thing looking at this hand that I think is a relative weakness is it has this natural follow-up in 7, but it does not, if they go somewhere in the bottom row, have this natural follow-up in 3. Because while 2, 6, 3, 6 will be set up for 2, it will not be set up for 4 and 6, and 6, 3, 2, 6, while it fits nicely in 4, does not work in 2 or 6. So I would suggest that's one thing. I would like the hand to have an attacking option here ready to set up. Another potential weakness is it doesn't have a great card to put in 5, though of course it could put something like 6, 3, 2, 6 here, and 2, 6, 3, 6 now can recapture the starter from 2, or it can recapture the starter now from 4. But should we want to follow up in 5, it doesn't have a great option there, but it does have options. It's not, I think, a weakness to the hand. Another move to be considered might be here, which would set up 6, 7, 2, 3 for 4, or fully more set up, or set up 6, 2, 6, 3 for 2 or 4 as well. So one card for 2 spots is always good. Never having the double capture, but usually with a corner starter hand, you're not going to quite get the full 5 setup that 5 starter hands are going to prepare. So I think the hand does a bunch of cool things. I think the one kind of obvious problem in just how it plays with itself is that it doesn't have this move in 3 ready to go, right? And one thing Homer points out in his article is he describes the hand as vulnerable to the L, and I think this is just fundamentally correct. And the L usually comes from people playing in adjacent corners, either 3 or 7, and that it doesn't really have an automatic response, especially to 7. To 3, it could maybe block. It does avoid a block where it can't be overpowered if the starter is comboed, right? We still have the card in 2, and it's unlikely that for them to have set up a move in 5, so now we might be able to continue somewhere like here, depending on their hand, of course. But it's also nice that we have this option in 7, which is usually fairly powerful, right? Because the 2-6-3-6 is now really strong. But again, if they go in 7, we don't have that option in 3. Another thing that I think is a little troublesome, potentially, is it doesn't necessarily have a good way to deal with the far corner. Now here, it does have captures both way on the far corner. It does have good control over it. But imagine if instead of 6-1-4-7, they had 7-1-4-6, right? We cannot take a 7 from 6 if a 7 is facing up from 9. And we can take a 6 going left, but it's a little... So, how to say this better? So we can't take a 7 facing up, and if there's a 7 facing left as we see here, it's possible our 2-6-3-6 is going to get overworked, right? Because it is the only capture card we have for 2 different squares. Now, if these were obviously paired squares, that would be better, right? If this card was our only card for both 2 and 4, that would work out fine, because anytime the opponent plays in one of 2 or 4, we would play in the other. They're an obvious paired set of squares around a corner. However, 2 and 8 are not as clearly paired squares, and if we need to occupy one of them, it's not so clear that the other one will soon become blocked. We may later need to occupy it as well. And so I think 2 and 8 not being as naturally paired squares means having one card for both those squares is going to be a bigger problem. So I think one fundamental kind of issue with this hand is after using our corner for 1, we are weak facing the far corner. And plays in the far corner are often going to be a little awkward for us to meet. And I think the natural instinct maybe should be something like this setup move in 7 we've talked about. But again, it would be nice if we had setup moves in 3 as well. Because a setup move in 3 would really help, given that, say that they had the 7 up facing 9. Again, I don't have a card here that does that, because the 6-2-6-3 would be able to combo 7s as well. But the problem with this move, of course, is we have different cards to recapture in 4 and 6 than 2, and we don't want to have different cards for paired combo squares. I hope I'm explaining this clearly enough. The other thing is we also have trouble attacking the adjacent corners. So the main weakness of this hand is that it has a difficult time attacking corners. So if we look at... I didn't pick good cards for this example. Okay, let's say we look at this move here. We're going to recapture our starter, and then they're going to go here. And we can immediately see, yeah, we have trouble attacking the corner, right? Our 2-6-3-6 was a card needed for too many rolls, much like I just talked about 2 and 8 being paired squares with the example of them playing in 9. If they play in 7, this card is also needed for both 2 and 8, and now blue has these 2 safe cards that red can't attack. And this brings up 2 potential weaknesses. One is we sometimes have difficulty attacking corners because we often only have one card that's good at attacking those corners, and that card will often be needed elsewhere. So we're going to end up with a lot of spots where we've used the 2-6-3-6 and don't have it at a needed moment elsewhere. But the other thing is we don't have a good 5 setup. After either of our recaptures, and we can see this if we go with 6-7-1-4, if they could play in 3 with a 7 facing down, so just pretend this as a 7 facing down, or I guess a 6 facing down also works here, because again, we've used our up-down cards, so this is already safe. We don't have a way to attack 6, and if they could have taken our starter with a high number facing down, we don't necessarily have a way to take that either, right? If the card in 2 had a 7 facing down, we would have no captures in 5, nor any captures in 6. And so, again, they could be left with this strong setup, because we're not good at attacking that corner, and our recapturers do not set up particular pluses in 5, right? We do have pluses in 5 against a 6, but not against a 7. And in the other version, where they've captured from 4, and we recapture from 2, we have pluses against a 6 there, right? We could plus a 6 from 5 multiple ways, or same, but we cannot capture a 7 there. So one other thing is, with our recapturing cards, we don't always set up for 5. Now this is a lot to ask for from a hand, right? This is I'm looking at so many different types of positions and saying, do we kind of have the perfect card for all of these? And the answer is, of course not, right? No hand's going to, except maybe in the very old days when it was possible, when card selections were so limited that the opponent wouldn't have that many options to attack your starter because there just wouldn't be the cards to do it, and you could really set up for every scenario. But now that so many cards are available, the defense has so many options that it is hard to, and I think we can see the hand doesn't have the perfect answer for everything. But the thing I wanted to note here was we can make this hand better. I really like the classic Homer hand, but I think there's a natural fix that helps a bunch, not all, but a bunch of these problems. And I think if you've paid attention as I talk through what I think the issues are, that it doesn't have this setup move in 3 if wanted, that it doesn't have this, recaptures in some squares that set up 5 to be able to take 7s if they've put a 7 facing towards the center from the other capture square. Things like that, attacking the far corner if it is a 7 upwards. I think if you think about all these things, there's one little change to make that I believe makes the hand substantially stronger. So this is going to take me a moment, but I'm going to put in the card change I think really helps this hand. Makes it a little less symmetrical looking, but if you have an opinion, this would be a good time to pause and think about it. Maybe there's multiple answers here, but I think there's this one little change that really helps. Alright, and I believe it should... Yes, it has been brought up. And the difference is this 6-3-6-3. So now suddenly we can take 7s facing up from 9 and 6. We also much more naturally have this as a potential corner because we have the recaptures in both 2 and 6, which we did not have before. It also means we have this setup. If we go in 1 and they go somewhere in the bottom row, we can potentially go in 3, and now 6-3-6-3 is great in 2, 4, and 6. So suddenly with this little change, I think so much more is set up. We can also see that we potentially now have captures in 5 of a 7 facing down, because 2-6-3-6 will suddenly plus a 7 facing down. So we have more options in those kind of situations too. And while people capturing our starter at higher levels is not going to be very common, at some point they're likely to attack it. And if 5 is available, it is nice to have those potential setups down the road, even if they don't happen immediately. So I think this simple little change really fixes a lot of potential problems in the hand, and the 6-3-6-3 really brings a lot together. Now, potential things it weakens us on is suddenly the 6-1-4-7. If there was a 7 up, now the 6-3-6-3 would be able to take it, but a 6 up we can no longer plus wall. But we could already overpower that, right? Now, any card put in 9, we will have captures. We can capture a 7 with this, or anything below a 7 with this. We can capture a 7 with this, or anything below a 7 with this. So we have a better attack against cards in 9. We have a better setup in 3. We have better potential setups down the road for 5. I think it really increased. We have this corner in 3 even without preparation that is now much better set up as an alternative corner to build around besides our normal starter in 1. I think it brings a ton of the hand together without being a super complicated change. And I think, like watching a lot of Piggyman build hands, there were often a lot of iterations of the hand where at first he tries a very symmetrical looking thing, and often he ended up with the symmetrical thing. But sometimes you notice this little slight change to slightly less symmetrical actually pulls things together much better. And so I thought this was a neat change to the hand, and I wanted to show it and talk about it a little, and why I thought it was such an important improvement to an already good hand. And I do some hand testing, me messing around and a little using some of the AI stuff. And this jumped the hand from being in the middle of the level 4 hands I had tested to being either the top or one of the top few level 4 hands I have tested. Now my testing method isn't all that good, but it was a really big and clear jump. The one spot it was definitely weaker is hands that are made of 6/6s cards, like 6/6-3-2s or 6/6-3-3s or 6/6-2-2s. If there was a large preponderance of them in the opponent's hands, like 3 or more, often the hand got a little weaker with the 6/3-6-3 versus a 6/2-6-3, of course, because the 6/2 is better at plus walling 6s. But this only really showed up when the opponent's hands really had a lot of 6/6s. Like one or two 6/6 type cards, and the 6/3/6/3 played better, as it plays better within our own hand. So we'd expect it to take a kind of extreme situation for it to not be the better choice overall. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. Was I think this is a nice hand and a nice way to build a hand. I think what I call like the Homer hand or the three corners hand is, if available, always going to be a pretty decent hand. And you can build very simple ones, and then you can start thinking, okay, do I have follow-up setups, like these corner setups after my initial corner? And this hand, in fact, does. You know, the 2/6/3/6 is just incredibly powerful after this corner setup. Or in the other instance, with this improvement, the 3/2/7/6 and 3 becomes a very powerful setup move. Does it have potential setup moves in 5? If they go in 9, can I make a move in 5 that further sets up my other cards? You know, something like this sets up the 2/6/3/6 to be a little more powerful in 4. Does it have, if they capture and I recapture, am I likely to have set up 5? Right? And if we can get all these little things working, the more we get working, the better hand it's going to be. And I think this is basically the platonic version. I think this is about as much as you can get right as is possible. But I would love to see people try for better, and I think it is a good hand build. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is I then worked on an AI. A bunch of the AIs I've worked on to try to be good random players, but one I worked on to just try to play the Homer hand right. Could it play it right? Does it play well with the Homer hand? And so if you don't see me drag a move, that's because I've clicked the AI move button and it will make moves. And this was my attempt to make an AI using kind of general principles, but that would play the Homer hand how I think it is correctly played. So if I say AI move, it indeed plays the starter I wanted. And if I capture it, you'll notice here the Homer hand has 2 recaptures, but I believe it will recapture. Oh, no, it didn't. But the reason it didn't is because this sets up 5, right? It would normally recapture with the 6/3/6/3, but here it recaptures with the 6/7/2/3 because that potentially sets up this plus and 5 down the road. And normally it does recapture the way I want. If I go in 4, it will indeed recapture in 2. And as we talked about, this is a difficult situation, right? Because I've set up this wall, and I'm curious how it plays it here. Let's see if it can manage to hold a tie. So it finds safety. Now, I don't really want to go in 5 because it has the plus and 8. And if we play that out, this looks like I just lose. Yeah. So I can't combo in 5. I don't have any capture in 4. Occasionally moves in 4 still work, but that looks tricky. So my instinct... This looks very bad, doesn't it? I don't really have something appealing in 9. One nice thing about the hand is because it recaptures itself so nicely, as we've seen here, if I can set up, like, if I do some, move that sets up an interesting combo from 9 on the card in 3, which I don't have, but if I did have it, the player of the Homer hand wouldn't have to be that worried because it's only going to flip one card. It's never going to be flipping multiple cards in this combo. So this looks pretty bad for me. I'm not going to take the time to solve everything here. Let's put in this move and see how it continues. So I guess I snuck out with a tie here. But you can see it put a lot of pressure with its play. I think the move in 3 was pretty good, and maybe I can get a tie, but it's going to put a lot of pressure. And I think the capture of their starter in 4 with the idea to set up in 7 is a very strong idea, and it's still, with the move in 3, found a good way to have high pressure for the rest of the game. Now what if I play, say, a center play? Let's see how it handles center moves. So what would be a reasonable center move? This card already has a combo, so if I could set it up for 2, that would be great, but there doesn't seem to be a way. Let's go here. Just setting up a same in 2 that red doesn't share. And let's see how they handle it. Because one thing about these moves is because none of red's cards have the combo in both 2 and 4, if we can leave those squares open, red with last turn will only be able to hold on to one card for last turn, and the idea of these 5 replies is often I have two different cards to combo in each of the squares, but that's okay because I'll have two cards left on my final turn. You will only have one card left in your final turn, so you won't be able to save cards for both combo squares. So I'm curious how it deals with it. Yeah, and it's been doing this move 2636 specifically in 8. And I think this is really interesting. And I think it makes a bunch of sense as a move. One reason is, just putting in a random move, there are plus walls on both sides of it, right? And similarly, if they went in 6, there would be these plus walls on both sides of it, right? But it really reliably picks 2636 in 8 rather than going in 6. And I think that's kind of interesting, and I want to try to sort of explore why that is. Now, one thing is, do they have safety in 2? And the answer is no. The 3276 can capture anything that goes in 2. But if we went in 6, similarly, the 6723 could capture anything that goes in 4. So the difference isn't there. And the next thing is kind of, let's look at our starter. I think this is really important. Our starter has a 7 facing down. We cannot match that in 4 with a 7 facing up. So if they ever do some kind of slide along option in 4, that would be a bad choice, say here. If we take it, they'll be able to play in 2 and flip stuff back. Or if they go in 7, we cannot go in 4 and flip it without being vulnerable to this huge combo from 2. Now the 6, we can equal, right? We can have a 6 facing the 6 multiple ways. So if, for instance, this were to happen, something like this, where we'd want to overpower, we can't because we'd get comboed, but we could play something here, right? We could lock something in. So I think it's interesting because that would lead me to think this would be the better option because it plays a little better around where the 7 and 6 are. So, but I do think... So let's see how it plays against this move, for instance, in 7. Right, so it can't touch this 2-6 area, right? That's very dangerous, but it's keeping... Also, you'll notice one other key point, sorry, I should have said this, is 2636 is our only recapture from 2. So it is giving up our recapture from 2. We have 2 different recaptures for 4, so it would make a lot of sense to give up one of those recaptures and keep the other. And it is very interesting to me that we give up a full recapture. But I think if we're going to give up a full recapture... Oops, Skype just opened for some reason. If we're going to give up a full recapture... Go away. Hopefully things don't start running slow. There we go. Okay. If we're going to give up a full recapture, they don't want to take it immediately because that gives us access to 9, which is a great square to have. So if we're going to give up a recapture on our starter, we want to give it up facing towards sort of the empty space. Because they don't particularly want to occupy 4 at this moment. So okay, let's continue it out. They try to take advantage. Block 7. I'm just going to same it because that looks reasonable. And we can just play out the game. And this one does end up as a 5-5 tie. Alternatively to saming, don't want to flip 1 because that can be... No, that can't be comboed back, so let's just take that, right? They gave up the recapture. Right, and this is the setup we've been talking about, right? This move would not be possible with the 6-2-6-3 because it wouldn't set up for 2, and here we can see again red manages a tie. So that's kind of neat play, I think. The 5 response does give the starter a little trouble, I think. I think blue arguably has an advantage in this game. But I do think 2-6-3-6 here is a useful option. What if we looked at the other version with 6-3-6-3? What would be a reasonable way to continue this? Maybe something like here? Let's see how it plays it. So it blocks. I'm going to take. That's a weird way to block, though, to block 3. I guess it can't play here because it'll flip. But I would expect to play here, but maybe this is such a good sweeper on the bottom row, it is better than the upward power from the... Okay. So they block. I'm going to capture. Can they manage a tie? Yes, they can. I have no captures either. I've used all my up power. And yeah, we can get a tie in the end. So, alright, so 6-3-6-3 also looks like a promising idea in these setups. I will say, in my playing around with this hand, moves in 9 in these 1-5 situations, I don't think play all that well with this kind of hand. I think the idea of going in 8 or going in 4 usually makes more sense. Let's try a couple other things. What if we go in 3? So the idea behind this move is it sets up the plus in 2, but it also gives red, really powers up this card, so maybe we should find a different way. I'd think here to set up this, no, that's not even the same. And this wasn't a plus, don't know what I'm thinking. For some reason I thought the card in 1 had a 7 to the right. Let's go... Let's try here. This is a little uncomfortable, right? We start to see the 6-6 problem for our Homer hand because this card suddenly doesn't have the capture from 6. So it likes to block, and I think this is reasonable. The other idea we've talked about is this corner option, setting more stuff up, but we don't have the capture in 4, and that may prove a problem down the road. So, okay. Let's go with its move. And I'm just going to capture things when I can. But you'll notice I don't have the play in 5, so there's a very strong argument for going something in maybe this card in 6 as well to set up for 5. So we'll look at both and see how it plays both. So here, again, the Homer hand does such a good job taking things with plus wall that any combo doesn't hit multiple things. I'm going to keep capturing just to play out the game. And... did I win? So the Homer hand lost. So I guess this was a tough situation. Again, Homer has said this hand is vulnerable to L's. Was there a better option here? There's no capture in 6. This is one of those times the 6-3-6-3 has been a weakness rather than the 6-2-6-3. I wonder if there's a save here. I'm not going to take the time to try to find it. Let's look at the other L. But like this player shouldn't be perfect, right? I didn't make this like a perfect AI. I tried to make one that played it pretty soundly, pretty sensibly. So okay. I'm going to keep taking. 7-3. Aha! It can combo either card I would put in 8. Leading to 5-5, so it does hold there. So yeah, not the idea. The idea is not to have made a perfect AI. There should be lines that beat it, right? What if we play out my other idea with this hand that I don't think this AI is very good at finding, though the AI is pretty good. So red doesn't have a capture in 6, so it seems logical to go in 2. Doesn't really matter if they flip the card in 1 because it's easily flipped back. So let's just have a 6 down. That looks tricky. Let the AI move. Huh. Because I gave up my captures, it just locks in safety. Interesting. Well, let's have the AI play out the game against itself and see what happens rather than force me to use my brain. And we get another tie. So, okay. I mean, the hand's not looking fantastic here. We're getting a lot of ties on second turn. But I think we can see how it works. See that the AI is playing pretty well. But the hand does have this problem with corners, right? It fundamentally has this little difficulty fighting corners. That came up here. Okay, let's do one last game. Let's see how the AI faces a move in 9. Now, I gave up my capture for 2, so yeah, it should block 4. And what would be interesting? That's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to take safety. That does give up my recapture. No, I think this is okay. Alright. 5 is tempting, but I get samed back. So I probably want to block 6. Just playing on general principles, not doing extensive calculation. This sets up a big same in 5, but again, they can combo back, and the combo has serious problems, like if, if something like this happened. Right, that would be very bad. Alright, well, rather than think, I'll let the AI play it out against itself. And red gets a win. There we go. But I think this is clearly kind of a difficult position for blue, given that red has controlled 5 nicely. So I guess I'll stop here, but I wanted to talk a little about kind of adjusting hands and figuring out how to make them better, the 3-corner type hand, and making an AI purely designed to try to play this hand type pretty well. And I think it's a pretty good but not great player, as I think we can see here.